I'm Courtney Conklin, and I would like to welcome you all here today for our panel discussion on the next generation of nonprofit leadership. The YNPN, which is the Young Nonprofit Communications Network, Young Nonprofit Professionals Network, has coordinated this panel for you today. We have a lot of important information that we would like to share with you. YNPN is a national organization that engages and supports young professionals in the nonprofit industry through professional development, networking, and social opportunities to better all of our young professionals. Just to give you a brief history about YNPN, we are a national organization, and we started in 1997 in San Francisco, and our group has now grown to over 10,000 members across a dozen cities in the United States, Kansas City being one of them. The Kansas City YNPN started about a year ago as an affinity group of the Council on Philanthropy, and we are now really proud to announce that we have over 80 members, and we are continuing to grow with each month as we host happy hours on the second Tuesday of every month, so if you haven't attended, please do so. We are holding these happy hours, and we are also going to provide more professional development opportunities for our young professionals as members and outsiders as well. Before we get started today, we would like to thank the Kauffman Foundation for hosting us, and we would also like to thank our sponsor, Entire Computer Solutions, for their support. Today's session will include a presentation on national data from a YNPN study done at our national organization. And then we will open up the discussion to our panelists for more of their information and input. And then we will finally conclude with a question and answer session and open that up to the rest of the audience. So before we get started, I would like to welcome Ann Roth of Entire Computer Solutions, and she will introduce our panelists today. And also I want to mention that if you didn't put your business card in when you signed in, we would like you to do so because we have a special drawing that we'll be doing later. Thank you.
Thank you, Courtney. Well, so I have to start out with a little generational story, and but before I do that, because it sort of involves my husband, he's sitting right here. He's the one that most of you have a business card of, Scott, and we also brought along Gregory, who's more your age, so we thought, okay, you can relate. Well, anyway, so this is my sort of little funny generational story, but it just happened this morning. So we have 3 boys, and Scott was taking them to school this morning, and Benjamin, who is 8, that would mean halfway to driving, which kind of freaks me out. Yeah. Anyway, so he's 8 years old, and he didn't want to eat the crust of his toast. And so my husband told him, he said, well, you don't eat the toast, we're going to put you out on the street for 2 days so you will know what it's like to not have anything to eat. And so Benjamin kind of looks at him and thinks, and he says, I don't think grandmother would like that very much. And that's my mom, and that's true, she wouldn't, so that's the generational thing there. We are so excited to be a sponsor, and thank you to Courtney and Patrick and Nicole for asking us to do this, because we believe really firmly in this educational series. And part of, from an educational perspective, you all should have a little flyer like this that has some points to ponder. And Scott has a whole 3 or 4 pages that talk about these 8 points that your website would have, and if that's something that you would like more information on, feel free to email him. We do Entire Computer Solutions is a technology consulting firm, and we actually have 3 different focus areas. One of which I just talked about, which is an interactive website presence. We also do software selection, particularly in the donor database sector, and then we also do IT and network support. And thinking about, this is going to get you guys thinking a little bit before I introduce the panels, thinking about the interactive portion, I have a $5 Subway card. If someone can tell me how many new blogs are created every day. Okay, this is interactive. Anybody want to guess?
100,000.
100,000 is actually pretty close, but it's higher. So that means someone else can guess a higher number and win $5 at Subway.
137,000.
137 is pretty close, but it's too high. So somewhere between
125,000.
120. Who gets 125? Okay, we'll pass that up to you. 120,000 new blogs are created every day. So that equates, and by the way, that's not entries, that's new blogs. And the other question that I will ask you is, what language, what do you think is the most popular language for blogs? Chinese? No.
Japanese.
Who said Japanese? That's exactly right. Japanese is the language that most blogs are created in. Number 10 now, the 10th most popular language for blogs is Farsi. So, interestingly enough. So, as you think about that, think about ways that you can make your websites more interactive, because I believe that's a critical key to success. So, without further ado, I do want to introduce the speakers that you have that are here today. To my left is Matt Meyer. And he actually knows where my hometown is, so he's really cool. He is the CEO of the American Red Cross of Greater Kansas City, and he has spent, I think, amazingly and a wonderful thing. He spent his entire career with the Red Cross, beginning as a volunteer in junior high. When he graduated from college, he began his professional career with the Red Cross as a national specialist in safety services, and he was assigned to St. Louis. In 1979, he joined the Dallas area chapter, where he also served as Director of Safety Services. He was promoted in 1986 to Associate Executive Director in Dallas, and in 1990, he left there to be the CEO of the Southeast Louisiana chapter in New Orleans, and he was down there, he told me, for Hurricane Andrew, correct? He had joined and leads the American Red Cross of Greater Kansas City as the Chief Executive in 1996. So thank you for being a part of that. Gary Baker, he's laughing.
He told me he wrote, he told me he wrote my bio.
Oh. Very nice, Patrick, very nice. Well, Gary's actually coming home because I learned that he used to be here at the Kauffman Foundation. He is currently the Director of Community Building Initiatives, Senior Fellow and Adjunct Professor of the Midwest Center for Not-for-Profit Leadership. Prior to joining UMKC, he was the Director of Youth Development and Manager of Planning and Support Services for the Ewing Marion Kauffman Foundation. He served as team leader for a Kauffman Foundation study, the Building Community Concept Team. And this team conducted a nationwide survey of best practices and key learning points, which focused around the question of what is a healthy community. He also facilitated numerous planning projects for various not-for-profits in the Greater Kansas City area. And along with this, he facilitated training for the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department, which focused on community policing and team performance. And on a personal note, I will tell you, he actually, when Scott, my husband, and I met with him one time, he gave us some fabulous advice, not only about this sector, but about some neat things to do with families. So, the third person is Michelle Davis, and I think you all know who she is. She is the Executive Director of the Council on Philanthropy, and she and I have something in common. All we have in our house are boys. So, Mother's Day is coming up. Feel sorry for us. Prior to joining the council, Michelle spent 4 years at the national headquarters of the National Kidney Foundation as a fundraising consultant and the national director of training. She spent 3 years at the corporate headquarters of Feral Gas, as manager in the training department. She's a graduate of Missouri State University with a degree in organizational communication and a member of the Centurions class of 2008. And very recently, if you haven't picked it up yet, pick up your copy of Ingram's magazine. She's on the cover. She's one of the 40 under 40s. So congratulations. And finally, Patrick Salib serves as fundraising manager for Heartsup Companies. Prior to this position, he served as director of marketing for American Humanics. He serves actually on the board of directors for the Council on Philanthropy, and he is the board chair of the group here today, the Young Not-for-Profit Professionals Network of Kansas City. And that is a tongue twister if you haven't had a lot of coffee in the morning. So those are the panelists, and then the speaker today is Stephen Bauer. He is the director of the Initiative for Not-for-Profit Sector Careers, a research and advocacy project launched in 2002 and facilitated by the American Humanics. The goal of this project is to cultivate the talented next generation of nonprofit sector leadership, that's you guys, and facilitate the entry of those professionals into the nonprofit sector workforce. Prior to his work at American Humanics, he supervised 30 full-time volunteers in youth mentoring and after-school programs as a project manager for City Year Cleveland. And as a parent, I thank you very much for doing that. And I want to, let's all welcome him up here.
Again, I'd like to thank Ann and entire Computer Solutions for sponsoring this event, as well as the Kauffman Foundation and the Council on Philanthropy for being so kind to us young, burgeoning nonprofit leaders. So can I have one more round of applause for our sponsors? As you may have seen in the media, there's this big buzz around the impending doom of the baby boomer retirement. What's going to happen when all of those individuals, Gary's all for it, what's going to happen when those individuals that built the modern nonprofit sector that we know and love today, what's going to happen when they are ready to retire and hand over the reins? There's a lot of questions out there and not a whole lot of answers yet. There's still people are really, I think, trying to figure this issue out. I think it's very easy for us to think about the problem and be aware of it, but it's even harder to come up with the solutions. What's it going to take to have a seamless transition, or as seamless as possible, transition between the current leadership and the next level of leadership? So that's kind of what we're here to talk about today. I'm very excited that we had this turnout, this level of turnout. What's even more exciting about the people in the audience is that it's not all young people. There are individuals here that come from the entire age spectrum, let's put it that way, represented in the room, and so I appreciate you being a part of this conversation and taking these conversations back to your organization and encouraging dialogue within your companies so that your organizations can have as seamless a transition as possible. One of the, as Courtney sort of talked about, the YNPN, Young Nonprofit Professionals Network National, did a survey late last year of their members. Currently it's 10,000 members strong. They wanted to get an idea of what the perceptions of what it takes to be a nonprofit leader are. Did they feel as though that they had the skills to step into those leadership positions? Did they want to step into those leadership positions? What did they feel as though they need to step into those positions? And it was actually a very great survey. And I would submit to you today that this is only, we're going to be discussing some of the very initial findings. There's a much more thorough report coming out next month. And I'm going to keep on hitting on that because there's going to be a lot more implications and conclusions drawn from this full report that's going to be coming out next month. But we thought this was such a hot topic, and with the recent birth of YNP in Kansas City, wanted to kind of play off of that and get you all together here today to talk about this stuff. One of the things to think about in the data consideration, of the 10,000 members that were surveyed, there was a national response of about 1,600. Of which 22 were Kansas City representatives. So I say this, I'm not a statistician, but I know enough to know that 22 is not a critical mass when it comes to these things. So please keep that in mind as we report this data. We're less than a year old, and so as Courtney said, we're just now up to 80. That's 80 people that have either come to one of our happy hours or expressed an interest in our listserv. So we're really trying to build up membership. And so if this survey were done in 5 years and our membership were up, we'd have a much more accurate, I think, look at what the sector is. But I think there's enough to draw some conclusions and at least spark some initial conversations here today. So that's, yes. And again, I'm going to point this out again. Please, please, please be looking forward to that report coming out next month because that's going to draw much more deep conclusions. Take a look at some of the demographics that we have. On the left side, you'll see some of the information from the national survey and then some of the information from specifically our Kansas City respondents. We were able to pull the responses from the Kansas City individuals that submitted this survey and then pull some of that stuff out. We're going to be comparing the Kansas City data to the national data. In some places they're very, very similar. In some places they're a little off and a little different, but I think this offers, again, a basis for conversation. As you can see, the national average was 82% female, 16% male. We're roughly that for Kansas City, a little more male, which is good. As a male in the nonprofit sector, we're few and far between. I appreciate there's so many men out there in the audience right now. As far as diversity, 73% white, 6% African American, as you can, and other groups with the national survey. KC respondent was a little more polarized, 91% white, Asian Pacific Islander. That's not to say that the Kansas City nonprofit community isn't diverse, especially with young nonprofits. It's just, again, please keep in mind that we only have 22 respondents to our part. So I would submit to you that we are much more diverse than that. To get an idea of organizational commitment, 50% of organizations with what is over $3 million and 50% were below, and about the same for the Kansas City respondents. As far as education level, I thought this was important because you know, if you submit that you want to go on and work in the nonprofit sector and make the commitment to go through a graduate program, certificate program, I think that's one step that's going to hopefully ensure the fact that you're going to stay in the sector. From the national, 17 have master's degrees and 6 have some sort of certificate. And here in Kansas City, obviously because of the great work of the Midwest Center and UMKC and all of the other professional development opportunities we have here, 40% have masters and 36 have certificates. I should also note that the YNP and the Kansas City, the board here, and then also a number of the people that have been participating in the happy hours and other events that YNP in Kansas City has had are products of the UMKC program.
So we're producing folks that can really drink. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. Well, they like to drink and like to take surveys. So, so that's a good
As long as they
move.
don't mix the two.
Exactly. Never survey while drinking. That's a great point. The evidence of the leadership gap. I've got just a few slides here that brings out some sort of broad initial findings from the national survey, and to kind of give some comparison. The question was asked, where do you think your next job is going to be? And then the options below: consulting, in the nonprofit, work, philanthropy, government, for-profit, or other. And as you can see, the green bars over here on the left side of each one of these are the national results, and the orange are Kansas City results. And Kansas City was pretty much right on par with what the national trends were. I think, fortunately for us, that Kansas City professionals seem to be a little more tied to the sector than their national counterparts. But really, there is no clear-cut sort of winner, if you will, for non-nonprofit next jobs. But what does this say? This says that you know, we're losing 35 to 40% of the nonprofit professionals on a national level and a local level to jobs elsewhere. So I'm glad that it's 60% that are wanting to stay, but we also need to be aware of that 30 or 40% that are looking for employment elsewhere. And why are we losing talent? The results were a little sort of mixed on this between the national and the Kansas City data. As you can see, salary burnout and job stress, I don't think those are all a big surprise for those in the audience that have worked in the nonprofit sector. These tend to be similar trends that sort of run throughout surveys like this. Surprisingly, though, was salary. The Kansas City nonprofit professionals, for the most part, seem to feel as though they're making a decent wage compared to their national counterparts. So I mean, that's a point of contention, and again, I would submit that the full report and having YNP and Kansas City grow a little bit and take the survey over again would give us a little more accurate data. But you can see that the two prime issues that people leaving the sector are burnout and salary, as well as sort of the no career path was an interesting session. They didn't. The respondents responding to that is highly likely as an option for why they aren't staying in the nonprofit sector. They didn't know where they could go in their organization other than out. There wasn't a clearly defined career path within their organization. There wasn't room for advancement, whether that be because it's a small organization that doesn't have highly structured career paths, or it's a large organization with people that just stay in for long amounts of time and don't provide opportunities for others to take over leadership roles. But again, job stress is another one up there as well. Another sort of key question and some stuff that came out of the national survey, the questions were asked around, do you feel as though you have the skills to take over leadership positions? Do your organizations provide you with opportunities to take those skills and learn those skills that you need? And what do you think those skills are? And it was pretty interesting that the majority of the people, both in national and the Kansas City results, indicated the job experience was sort of the biggest factor. They felt that being in an organization for a while and having a number of years of experience was the biggest factor. But if you look at some of the other results, mentoring is very big. And we're going to talk more about that a little bit later on. I would very much suggest that if you're a young nonprofit professional and you don't have a mentor, find one and utilize them. I think that's something that that both sides of the leadership spectrum can do, and on the young professionals end, find mentors, and then on those more experienced and seasoned professionals, opt to be a mentor for somebody. Because as a young professional myself, that's an invaluable experience. We need somebody to help to learn from and to bounce ideas off of. This can be sort of an objective listener. Peer learning is also very important, and I think this really speaks, the peer learning specifically speaks to the way in which the experienced leadership tends to lead versus the way that the younger leadership tends to lead. Younger leaders and sort of, if you've done any of the generational research around the millennials and the characteristics of this new generation, I say this new generation, I'm part of this generation, we are very team-oriented. We're very project-focused. In all actuality, and you know, we're a little weary of a strict hierarchical, top-down type organization. So that's one of the big reasons why we need to start having these conversations. So when us, as young nonprofit professionals, start to transition into these roles, what's that going to mean for leadership structures within organizations? What's that going to mean for the way that organizations are organized and led and work together? And oddly enough, graduate degrees are moderately important. I would submit that they are, just because I have one. I've put in the time and effort, so I appreciated that. The professional associations and certificates were down there, and that was a little surprising to me. I thought, I'm a big believer in professional associations. That's why we started creating YNP. But I don't know if that's a factor of individuals not necessarily knowing what they can get out of professional associations or what, but I just kind of found it interesting myself. Interest in the ED position. When asked, there was a number of questions about, you know, will you become an ED, or are you interested in becoming an executive director in your organization? And are you interested in becoming an executive director in general? Only 9% are likely to be executive directors of their current organization nationally and locally. A lot of that plays into the lack of defined career path within an organization. Over 30% nationally and 64% locally are highly likely to serve as EDs in the future. So there's a little bit of a disparity between the national results and us local results. I like to think that those that took the survey in Kansas City are a little more ambitious than our national counterparts. But nationally, that's kind of that's an interesting number. 30% are only 30% are interested nationally in becoming an executive director. What does that mean for where we're going to find executive directors nationally? As you can see, some of the top barriers to executive transitions. These are barriers that young nonprofit professionals perceive as barriers that they will not want to step into executive roles. Long hours, demands of funders, demands of boards, job-related stress. Those top results comprise 75% of the responses nationally and locally. So those are all the top 4 issues among the respondents. There's been a lot of talk, and I've actually been a part of a couple presentations. If you're interested in this topic, Frances Kunreiter with the Building Movement Project did a fascinating study where she interviewed a lot of the baby boomer executive leadership. And she talks about the fact that executive directors don't do a good enough job selling their jobs to their younger counterparts. It's very easy to get frustrated in those types of leadership positions and you know, working long hours and being very much emotionally, personally invested in these organizations, which is what made the nonprofit sector what it is today. Don't get me wrong. But the current generation doesn't want to have, they want to be committed to their job, but they don't want it to be their life. They want to have a life outside of the job. And so there's going to be a lot of questions raised in organizational structures. As, you know, before we had just one executive director and then sort of everybody else. Should we start looking at structures where that executive director is split out? So there's an executive director and maybe a deputy director. They sort of take the roles and responsibilities and job requirements of that one executive director, that quote-unquote baby boomer generation executive director, and split them among 2. I'm speaking very much in generalities here and stereotypes, so please don't take, for those of you who are baby boomers in the generation, please don't take offense to that. I very much appreciate the contributions of your generation to this sector. But there are some changes that we do need to talk about. Only 7% nationally and 22% locally report salary as a barrier to executive transition. So apparently young individuals are seeing that executive directors are paid what they feel as though they need to be paid. In kind of areas of further analysis, again, I just wanted to kind of share with you some of the initial findings of the survey. These are all areas that either will be pulled out more in the full report coming out next month or in future surveys from YNPN. But there's a number of interesting questions here. One of the interesting things about surveys is the more questions you get answered on a survey, the more questions you end up having of the results. There's a number of questions here. How does the interest of becoming an ED and choice of next sector work and vary by geography, ethnicity, and gender? How does that play into it? What are the primary factors contributing to burnout and job success? I mean, you can sort of read these here yourself. But these are all questions we're hoping we can either work on together and answer some of these questions, or we pulled out in a future survey. With that, that's kind of the report on the data. I didn't want to spend too much time on the data. I think you all kind of got an idea for some of the additional findings. But I really think the power of this session is the dialogue and discussion we're going to have here today. So with that, I want to sort of transition into that section. The way this piece will work is that each of our panelists have sort of been asked a question in advance to kind of prepare a 3 to 5 minute piece on, and then we'll open it up to questions from the audience and sort of encourage that dialogue there, and that'll be the duration of the event. So with that, I'll sort of pose the first question to Matt with the Red Cross. How do you see this leadership transition play out in your organization, and what are you doing to ensure a smooth transition, especially for the Red Cross, but in the nonprofit sector in general?
I don't need the slide. Hello? Can you hear me? I probably don't need the microphone, but we'll use it for the benefit of everyone. The Red Cross, we're a large national nonprofit organization, so my answer is going to be a little different than it would be in a small local-based organization. And part of that is because we have, within the Red Cross, or if you take the 50 largest chapters in the American Red Cross, currently only 2 of those I could identify as chapters where someone in the chapter moved into the role of executive director in that chapter. Only 2 of those 50. Now, that doesn't mean that the other 48 came from outside the organization, but it meant that their career paths were different. Most of those who didn't come from outside the organization came from other Red Cross chapters, either having served as the chief operating officer in their chapter, or having served as the chief executive officer in a smaller chapter. So it just means that we don't so much movement, for example, from within the organization, from a position in that chapter up to the top role. And part of that probably has to do with the tenure over time. Timing is a huge issue. If you're in a chapter and you're someone's maybe 4 to 5 years away from retirement, then perhaps you could develop and train someone for that position. But since that doesn't happen very often, within the Red Cross anyway, we have, for our executive training, we have a national program called Star Track. I didn't name it, but I am involved in it. We've had 4 2-year programs where we run about 30 of our young professionals, mid-level managers, and managers of smaller Red Cross chapters through the program. And I have helped in a number of ways in that program. In the term 2 and term 3, I facilitated the programs along with some other national staff. And on this 4th session that we just completed, I was a coach for one of our mid-level or mid-young managers. And I think that's how we've been working with, for example, at the executive level, trying to identify Red Cross staff who would like to move the organization. I can tell you right now it's inadequate. We have 775 Red Cross chapters. We run 25 people through the program every 2 years. So you can see that we're not filling the gap nearly as quickly as we need to be from a training standpoint. Locally, we happen to have a situation currently where we've got a lot of, our entire leadership team is currently 50-something. We were all once 30-something, but we're currently all 50-something. And but we're also blessed with having a lot of 20 and 30-something young professionals on our staff, Courtney being an example of that, very talented, who we think should get assistance from us in the development of their careers. We don't believe for a minute that we're going to retain all these individuals within the American Red Cross as much as we'd like to, but whether it's working for Red Cross locally or working for Red Cross at a regional level or working for Red Cross at the national level, we'd like to see that. But if nothing else, we do believe we have an obligation to help them develop in their careers, and if that's to move on to another nonprofit organization, that's terrific, as long as we can maybe keep them in the sector, if you will. And so we've had some discussions recently about taking our Star Trek program, our national program, and replicating that here in the local chapter as a way of developing our staff. And what it does is it takes leadership competencies and management competencies which have been identified and are pretty common to almost any organization, taking those competencies, working with individuals on an individual basis, of course, and then developing individual development plans to work on those areas of competency which they feel they need to develop. Another part of that is emotional intelligence. If you've not done much work in emotional intelligence or read much about that, we get a lot of talented people in our organization who are technically excellent, but don't have the right emotional intelligence for the position. And so that's another area that we would hope to develop. So we haven't actually kicked things off locally. We do training on a regular basis and so forth, but we've not really sat down yet with our young professionals. And we'd like to tell this, first of all, I'd like to discuss with them whether they feel that it's necessary. Second, we'd like to find out what they'd like it to look like. Would they like it to be kind of informal with sessions geared towards brown bag lunch type of activities? Would they like it to be more formal like we do with our Star Trek program, where they have an opportunity to not only go through and develop individual development plans, but also do things like audit assignments, maybe in other chapters, which is something we do in our Star Trek program, interim chapter management assignments, which is again something we do in this National Star Trek program where we send them to Red Cross chapters to fill in for 4 to 6 weeks. We have those opportunities and we can arrange that. And so this program could be very formal, it could be very informal. So again, nationally we have a program that's in place. We've used it for about 8 years now. It's inadequate in terms of its size and scope. Locally, we'd like to replicate that because we've seen a gap. The organization has not pulled together for some time now a really good mid-level management training program to help us develop our young professionals.
Thank you very much, Matt. One of the things you said is you're hoping, your comments about hoping to train young professionals. You know they may not necessarily stay with the Red Cross, but you want to retain them in the sector. I appreciate that comment, and I think a number of organizations don't fully understand the fact that the younger generation is, we're sector and job hoppers. We're not sort of career organizational people. And that's important to keep in mind when preparing talent and realizing that all you can do is really prepare that person to be the best professional they can and provide them with opportunity and growth where they can hopefully stay in the organization, but realize that growth may mean moving out as well. So I appreciate that comment. Kind of moving to Michelle, from the Council on Philanthropy's perspective, what professional development are young professionals seeking in the Kansas City area, and how do you see that playing into their development as professionals?
Well, it's exciting to see so many of you here today, and I think that's a testament to the fact that you really are reaching out for additional learning opportunities, and not just basic skills, but also kind of that relationship, career path training. So I think this is a testament to the kinds of things that you're seeking. One of the things I would say, and again, it's evidenced in the data for Kansas City, and again, I know it's a small sample, but the fact how many more folks here in Kansas City have master's degrees and certificate programs speaks highly to the level of skills that you're bringing to the table. I graduated from college 11 years ago, and I didn't at the time when I was in college, we didn't have the prevalence of nonprofit certificate programs, and coursework in nonprofit was not high at the time. So you come out of the sector with a different skill set than I did even just 11 years ago. For me, when I came out and went to work for a nonprofit, to really focus and get more business skills, that's why I made a choice at the time to go into the for-profit sector. And I spent 3 years there really learning the business side. For those of you that are in American Humanics program, I know at Rockhurst they've just recently added a financial management component. So you're getting those kinds of things in your certificate programs. So all that to say, the kinds of training that we see that you're looking at, you're not necessarily looking for a lot of basic business skills for nonprofits. We see you looking for more mentoring, relationship type opportunities. I get called, and it's one of my favorite parts of the job, is from young professionals that just want to sit down and talk about where they might go next steps and what would be some good ideas on who they should network with, who they should talk to, the kind of skills they're seeking. Do I have alternative ideas for helping them get those skills? So that's the kind of things that I really see you seeking out, are those kinds of relationship-based career development opportunities. Now, not to say that you're not coming to training, because I know that there's 5 different organizations in town, plus the Midwest Center, that offer training, and all of our programs are selling out, and there are young people at those programs. So we do see you coming to the marketing and communication sessions, the fundraising sessions. One of the things that we see is that a lot of people have questions about, at the level that you're at now, you may have some board interaction, but not a lot. And so that's one of the areas when people come and talk to me is, if I'm preparing to be an executive director, I feel like I need to learn more about that board relationship and working with boards. And I will say, it is a challenge. It's like, I was telling someone the other day, it's like I have 19 bosses that I report to, and it makes life interesting. So, but not Patrick. Patrick's the best.
Yeah, I'm number 20 and 21.
So one of the things that we suggest, and that is that you should get involved in the community and serve on boards and learn more about what the relationship is on the other side of the table, so that when you do get into that ED role, you have a different perspective, and it also prepares you to deal with those relationships. So those are some of the things that we see. One of the other things that we're doing is we see a lot of people just asking again about organizational politics. And at the Philanthropy Midwest Conference this fall, we're actually going to offer a session called Organizational Politics Survival Kit. And it's some folks that are retired from the sector, so they're in a safe place. And they're going to really talk about some case studies and some examples of, how do you navigate that? Even in my role as an executive director, I have someone that's not formally a mentor, but I do call them for mentoring moments, where I've got an issue, a board issue, or I've got an issue with a staff person where I call, and for 15, 20 minutes, I lay out the situation and they give me advice. So I do think that that is a great thing. One of the things that I do think, leading a professional association, it was disheartening to see how low it was on the priority scale for that. But one of the things I would suggest is that being involved in professional associations is a great way to meet mentors. You might find, might know someone at another organization that you want to call on to be your mentor. But being in a professional association, serving on a committee, or going to training programs is a great way to sit down at a table and meet other people and identify people that you may never have thought would never have known that could be a great mentor for you. And there's great possibilities there. So I think those are important. And again, the one area, like I said, where we see people really seeking out training is in board service, and then also advanced skills in fundraising. So those are the 2 areas where we really see this.
Excellent. One of the things, Michelle, that kind of stuck out to me about your comments, it wasn't really represented in the data that I presented, but there were a couple questions in the survey that asked about what skills do you feel as though you need to step into executive director roles, and what are the perceptions of those skills. And what was surprising is that a majority of the respondents said that they needed to have all of these skills, board man, like all the skills that you know go into the organization. They need to have those mastered to step into the executive director role. A couple of the presentations that I've been doing that are part of, there's talking to executive directors, and they'll be the first ones to tell you that I'm not an expert in this, I'm not an expert in this, I'm not an expert in this, but I work with people. I create a team where we have a management team that can address all these issues. So I appreciate your comments there. Moving on to Gary, what trends do you see in the academic preparation of the next generation of nonprofit sector leadership?
First of all, as of Monday, I can take early retirement, so you all look really good to me. You are my future. I want you to be gainfully employed and make lots of money. We are biased a little bit in that we envision a future for all of you to be CEOs of your companies. So the Midwest Center and the academic world that I'm coming from is intentional about seeing you to grow up to be in senior leadership roles, if not the chief executive, certainly at the highest levels of all these organizations. And I guess what I want to say to you, having been in that catbird seat for the 20-some years, is that it really is a wonderful gig. It's a spin and shoot environment that is the innovation and the ability to create is what is maybe most rewarding about Matt's job or Michelle's job or my old job at Crittenden. What's most rewarding about my current job is I don't have to wear ties every day. So there are different gigs as you get older. But let's talk a little bit about what the question they asked, the trend lines. What I'm seeing is a little bit of building on what Michelle said. You're hired as an executive director to make payroll, and you're fired when you don't. So your skill set is you have to get good at creating and finding resources, all sorts of resources. And it starts with finding, and in my mind, it starts by having the ability to get hired by a board and understanding how to build and develop and work for and with that board. So we, in terms of future trends, I don't think we spend enough time preparing you all to do probably the most important job you are asked to do in that CEO position, and that's to work successfully with your boards. The trends that as I was thinking about this here this morning, I've been in Washington the last week working with another class, so I'm a little bit influenced by what I saw there, but clearly the world of political engagement in one form or another, whether it's internal politics like Michelle was talking about or external politics, there is so doggone much money in play and there's so much angst in that system, and the more skilled you are at navigating that world, the more you are going to be wonderfully successful in your career. E-philanthropy is just roaring like a prairie grass wildfire. If you don't understand how to use it and take advantage of it, you don't understand where we're going. And it's sea change just in the last year. It goes back to the Howard Dean phenomenon, but now we're seeing the Barack Obama phenomenon, where she actually raised more money than Hillary from many few smaller gifts, and much of it through electronic giving. We went to Africa on a mission trip over the Christmas holidays, and we organized 40 of my buds with a simple email and took around $1,100 for malaria. It was $5 malaria nets. That quick. You know, just a simple, straightforward, for $5 we can save a kid's life. And what would you like to have us take some money and do this when we go on this trip? So that's an issue. Endowment building, any of you that have been in any of our classes know that I just am preaching that from every rooftop and treetop. It's the only piece of really good news I can show the entire nonprofit sector. There is $43 trillion that started changing hands 10 years ago or 15 years ago and will change hands over the next 40 or 50 years, unlike anything ever in the history of America. Much of that going to this sector, much of it going to help sustain legacy and future operations. The sector is running way too close to the edge. We've worked on 8 bankruptcies and several mergers this year. We don't have enough cash. You can almost never have enough cash. You've got to get cash. Debt's bad, cash is good. You know, so there you go on the quick stuff. Personally, learn to listen. Learn to listen. Listening skills, especially in the senior positions. Listen to your customer, listen to your associates, listen to your colleagues. This networking stuff you're talking about is right on. Use strategic alliances to build great businesses. That's we're teaching it. You know what Kevin, the faculty, approved a new, brand new, full-blown nonprofit major at William Jewell last week, right, Kevin? Yeah. You know that. You know the alliances that we at the Midwest Center and Block School hope to form with Jewell around that idea is a new business opportunity for both of us. It's a good deal for the community, and it's a great deal for both schools, and it'll be fun to see how that develops. I was going to go just a little long, so let me finish these last 3 points and I'll shut up. I was doing some work in Wichita last week or 2 weeks ago now, and we were talking about communications, right? And what we used to talk in school is you have to have a good strategic plan, then you have to have a good business plan, then you have to get good at creating good executive summaries, then you have to create good one-word, Ronald Reagan, give me a well-written one-page memo. This lady knocked me down. She said, if you want to talk to me, you have to be able to say it in 16 words that fit on this screen. And it was one of those situations where, because of the world of texting and quick and rapid communication and how many of us, in Washington 2 days ago, Congressman Graves, Congressman Cleaver both taught classes for us and their aides. And during the course of those 2 one-hour classes, I can't tell you how many times their Blackberries went off. It was like they had a chainsaw on their hip, right? And so this world of learning to be effective in rapid communications especially, I'm not sure I like it, but I understand where it's taking us, right? It's an amazing phenomenon. The other thing I'll say about communications is one of the brilliant workshops that Michelle's group put on last fall. I think you have to learn to bifurcate your language. I am not a civic generation. I'm close. I'm a boomer, an old boomer. But as we look at these four major groups of folks, civic, boomer, Gen X, Gen Y, you do communicate very differently to all four of those sectors, and you better learn how to communicate differently, because the civic folks really don't like Blackberries. You with me? Don't even really like email. So you have to kind of understand how you get your message across to each of these groups. Interactive learning, we're trying to do everything we possibly can to create interactive learning. And I guess my last thought to you is that you're setting in a place that I'm proud of. We played a major role in helping come back to this foundation with a recommendation for, we called it a nonprofit campus, the space that you're setting in. The point of that story isn't bragging, it's the joy of working in our sector, is the labor of love and the joy of the journey. You get to play a role in doing stuff like this. You with me in terms of your career. You get to save children's lives in the days of prison. You get to help create the next generation of new ideas at the Kaufman Foundation. I get the joy of watching a room full of all third of you that I've had the joy of working with in one thing form or another, and you're the next generation of this good country we live in, the city we live in. So it's just a kick. This career that you're walking on and walking towards is truly a labor of love. Enjoy the journey. Right? That's a little preachy.
But I appreciate what you said, cash good, debt bad. It's a very simple message.
Cash good, debt bad.
But also what you said about technology. I'm sorry. What you said about technology, the younger generations grew up with the internet, they've never known a life without internet. And so it's going to be also very important for organizations to bob and weave and transition into formats and communication methods that really utilize all these things. So I appreciated those comments. Turning last but certainly not least to Patrick, what advice do you have for young professionals seeking to advance, and also what advice do you have for current leadership to help make that transition possible?
Well, first I like the way the question is phrased, because it talks to both sides, and I think it takes both sides. And so it takes both sides together. I think first of all, for us up-and-comers that are trying to make it in the sector, you have to be assertive, you have to be aggressive, you have to look for opportunities at your job that you have now. You know, look around your organization and where you can be involved in something that maybe doesn't fall in your job description, but you can go to your supervisor and say, you know, I'd really like to be involved in this project or this opportunity. And on the reverse side of that, it takes managers that are open to that idea, that are not stuck to firm job descriptions, that are open to letting their staff get involved. Mentorship has been a theme throughout this, and I think that's great. It kind of sounds like a very serious relationship with someone. You know, when you think about mentorship, sometimes I'm like, well, how does that happen? One of the best pieces of advice I ever received was just to go and visit with someone. So I'm setting all of you up now. Go and see an executive, you know, maybe at your organization, maybe not, and ask them to have lunch with you, ask them to have coffee and listen to what their career path was. They can give you some guidance, and that does a couple of things. One, informs you about stuff you won't know about just by reading their bio on the internet. And two, it puts you in front of them, and they see you as aggressive, they see you as assertive and willing to put your neck out there. And that's half the battle, really. Just having people know who you are and people knowing that you're ready for it. I think executives and managers really need to spend purposeful time each week or each month looking at their staff and thinking, how can I get this person involved? Maybe they have a staff person that's very talented and not willing to come to them with an idea, but they need to block that time on their calendar saying, how can I get what can I do to get my staff more involved? I think it needs to be purposeful, and it needs to be put into their calendar as one of their list of things that they need to do. And to close, I really can't harp on the mentorship thing enough. I think reaching out to people that have been there and done it is the key, and just continuing to do that can get you halfway there.
I appreciate sort of it takes both sides, and I've been a part of a bunch of these types of conversations, and what always tends to happen is we've got the young up-and-comers over on this side, and we've got the existing leadership over on this side, and it's hard to have conversations like this where it doesn't end up kind of being a butting of the heads. This is what we want, well, this is what we can offer type thing. And I'm hoping that we can draw from this presentation this morning and through this dialogue ways to kind of have these conversations together. I think Patrick said it very nicely. It does take both sides. We can't just be young professionals going after everything and totally taking for granted what the sector is now because of the leaders that are in those positions. They're the ones that made the sector what it is today. So it is going to take both sides. I'd like to thank our panelists for their comments, and what I'd like to do now is sort of facilitate the discussion for the remainder of the session. If you have a question or a comment, please raise your hand, stand up. I would ask that you also identify who you are and where you're from so we can all know that and possibly take you out to lunch later on when we're trying to figure out some of these mentoring relationships. And then if you'd like to address a specific panelist, please feel free to do so, or if you'd like to say a general question, I'll kind of help facilitate that as well. So do we have any questions or comments from the audience? And please speak loudly and clearly as well, too, please.
I'm Tricia O'Donnell. I work at the KU Medical Center in the Alumni and Community Relations
Would you mind
Office.
standing up? I'm sorry.
Everybody here.
Is that the last demand of the
Yes, that's the question.
And my question, Michelle, you mentioned getting on boards is a good way to get the experience. How do you go about getting on a board that you've not been involved with before?
Well, I guess, yeah, I should back up one step. The first thing I say before you get on a board is you should volunteer for that organization, because being on a board is a serious commitment. And it's a great learning opportunity for you as you think about becoming an executive director. But, you know, most boards I'm hearing, and Gary, you can chime in on this, are like at least a 2 to 3 year board term. You'll see some that have a 1 year board term, but I mean, you're committing yourself to 2 to 3 years. So I would suggest if there's an organization that you're interested in, you call and find if there's some way you can volunteer there so you can get a sense of the culture of the organization before you commit to serving on the board. So that's what I would suggest is find a couple organizations that you're passionate about. One great way to find some organizations is to use the Donor Edge tool. If you go to donoredge.org, you can search by interest area. So I might be interested in kids. I get a list of organizations. I see some good background on what their needs are, what their programs are. I can see if there's a good fit there. Then I can call in and learn more about what some volunteer opportunities might be. From there, then you can determine if, yeah, you really want to throw your name in the hat to be considered for their board.
Another, we've been struggling for several years now to figure out how to make all this really piece together. But they tell me that as of June of this year, we are ready now to go live with a concept called the Board Bank. And it will be a matching service for folks who, organizations, our database now in Kansas City has about 3,500 nonprofit folks that are linked to the Midwest Center's database. And people that have gone through a formal process or gone through some either board class or board session will be the people that initially are the ones that will go under the pool. Then we're going to try and figure out how to get more folks into the pool. And you all are highly coveted on boards. And the boards have difficulty. I'm not going to pick on everybody in the room, but finding people that are under 30 especially, or under 35, are highly coveted positions. More and more boards understand the generational thinking and how much that strengthens. The other thing that I have, this is my bias coming out, and I want to state it up front, I have good research. I've worked with, I actually know the number because I did the report last a couple weeks ago, 1,956 different organizations since I left Britain in '92. 1,956. So I have an N of 1,956. What I've observed is the smartest boards I work with meet the first test of American society. What's the first test of American society? Gender. When I walk into a room and I see half girls and half boys, they make better decisions. Period. how much smarter would Congress be? I'm dead serious. If that Congress was half girl instead of a fourth girl or whatever it is. I'm dead serious. I don't have good research to prove what I just said to you. So the fact that we have 80% of this organization being female would even make you more attractive in serving on boards. Young female board members, young female members on task forces or work groups. And the other thing to add to her point is volunteer for task forces. Patrick's point. Volunteer and get engaged with all sorts of things there. That's the best way to know you really like that outfit and they really like you. And roll up your sleeves and go to work. And you guys have kids and time and life and a bajillion things after you that aren't so much true with me anymore, with grandkids, and all the other things in my life. But that's a great way to know if you really like, before you get deep into the commitment of one of these serious boards. Boards are tough. Boards right now aren't a whole lot of fun to serve on. 8 bankruptcies, several mergers, everybody having money stress. It's a hard gig right now. It is.
So Amy?
Amy Mulligan from Rockhurst University. Gary, I just wanted to tag team onto your point there. I find it alarming that the sector is divided into about 80-15 female, and we find this. I'm the American Humanities Director at Rockhurst. We find this, and while I'm so thrilled that women are getting into this field and starting to move up and become executive directors, I also find it deeply disturbing that so few men are coming into the sector. And I just wanted to know if you've done much research on what are the barriers to keep boys and men from thinking about this as a career option.
Barriers for men?
Yeah, or there misperceptions.
Too many really smart, good women? I don't know. I'm almost 60 years old, been basically in the nonprofit world all my life. It's always been a female-dominated business. It was one of the early industries that was a mover, going back to Cree Nation and a whole bunch of folks, where women had a passion and an interest and excelled. I don't think that'll ever be much different, truthfully. And how do you get more men to get involved in it? I think you get more men to get involved in it as we become more civic and more community engaged. What I'm seeing in my young students, younger than you guys are old now. I'm serious, is almost like new hippies. There is this wonderful sort of new civic momentum in these minus 25 students that we're seeing coming in, men and women. So we're going to see more and more of these young, by golly, we got to figure out some way to make that right attitude. I'm old enough to remember what the Flower Children felt like and looked like, and boy, they look a lot like these folks. So that would be fun to watch. Won't that be fun?
I think you have a comment as well.
It's interesting, we made an exception to the rule. At least we were. About 17 years ago, 18 years ago, when I became the chief executive of New Orleans, I was the youngest chief executive of the Metro 50 chapters at age 34 or so. And but it was interesting. We had 46 men and 4 women as chief executive officers. Now that was primarily because most of us came out of many of us came out of a service delivery background a couple of decades ago and so or more. And we're seeing a transition. We now are about 50-50 men and women among the 50 largest Red Cross chapters in the country. And that's a good thing. I can attest to that. That's a good thing. It's not a good on board, but it's good as within our organization. We would go to Metro managers' meetings, and not one of us would ever admit we ever had a problem in our chapter. It was like, oh no, not in my chapter. We're not doing anything wrong or having any problems.
Testosterone.
Yeah, and we become a much more sharing organization in our management group. And now we send out emails and say, boy, I can't, we're having trouble with this. Does anyone have any ideas? And suddenly everybody's firing off emails. So it's a very different organization, and a much better organization. But part of that is because I think the women we see coming into the organization, many of them are coming from outside our organization. And they're leaving careers like some are attorneys, some of them large hospital systems. One is a recent manager of the Red Cross, is a former general manager of a television affiliate, a network television affiliate. And I think they're looking for something different. They want to change, and they want to be able to do something in this particular sector, and they bring great ideas and new skills and so forth. And we also see, of course, an influx now in terms of fewer people coming out of our service delivery side, such as disaster and health and safety and so forth, and more people, of course, coming into the organization with the fundraising and financial development skills, which is, as Gary mentioned, a huge issue. I would say, though, that coming into organizations with fundraising and financial development is a must in the future for all organizations. But I also think that one of the big derailers could be potentially down the road that we lose track of the fact that we also need to have good governance skills as managers, we need to have good human resource skills, and we need to have good finance and audit type skills. Those are the real derailers, and I think that particularly that governance issue, being able to work well with boards. And so we at the Red Cross have an opportunity, not a lot of opportunities, but we have community volunteers who serve on our board level committees. So that gives someone who isn't necessarily on the board itself, gets to work on those board level committees. That's where all the action takes place anyway. Our board meeting is relatively dull, but our committees have most of the activity and the action. And so in that case, one doesn't have to commit to a full 3-year term. It's kind of a 1-year term rolling forward, and they can be on the committee for 2 or 3 years, or 4, 5, or 6 years. And they bring certain expertise and or want to have an opportunity to learn different skill sets. And so if their background is fundraising, but they want to serve on a finance committee, then we can help with that kind of activity. So we do some of that. It's not unlimited in terms of space, but we provide those opportunities for individuals.
There was another question back here.
Me?
Sure.
Hi, I'm Allison Rickles. I'm with Farmhouse International Fraternity and Foundation. And I have a comment and a question. My first comment is that I recently read a report that said that over our lifetime, my age, or our age and younger, will have 14 different careers. Now, I don't know if I necessarily believe that, but I definitely agree with some of the comments that you made, that our careers are changing. But my question for Matt is, you mentioned emotional intelligence training. What kind of activities or training were you speaking of?
Well, I don't know that it's so much training, it's an awareness. There's a lot written recently on that subject, and books and materials, and there are workshops. I don't know if anyone's doing any workshops in emotional intelligence in the metro area or not.
It's a great idea.
Yeah. But,
I wrote it down first. I wrote it before Gary.
You know, let me give you an example. I had someone who worked for me many years ago, and they were a very high producer. This was many years ago in another city, and they just did an outstanding job. If they had a target, they hit the target, okay? But they made life miserable for everyone else in the organization. I didn't have more complaints about anyone than this one individual. It was like, if this individual comes back in our department, I'm gonna, you know, and just, it was, they created havoc. I mean, literally havoc in the organization by their behaviors, and that's tied into this emotional intelligence piece. So here you had someone technically expert, very competent, never missed a target from a service delivery standpoint in terms of their activities, but couldn't work well with everyone else in the organization. So it's the behavioral piece of that, and that's what emotional intelligence is. But those are real big derailers. Those are people who, from a technical standpoint, work their way up through an organization, and then they hit that wall. Or they get into the position of a chief executive officer or an executive director, and they can't retain that position. Because they don't work well with not only the staff, but they also maybe don't work well with boards. And I thought it was interesting that one of the barriers listed up here to being an executive director was working with boards. And I think some people have heard me say this, the most fun I have as an executive director is working with boards. Now, I had a lot of fun when I was doing service delivery, but I don't do that much service delivery anymore, except occasionally going out on maybe a national disaster operation. But most of what I do is working with boards, and that is fun. I would never have gotten to work with some of the people I have in the communities that I've lived in, like Dallas and New Orleans. I mean, a who's who of those communities, just like Kansas City. And I would never have touched ran into those individuals that serve on my board, you know, in another environment or sector. I mean, I just would have, you know, I would have known who they were. I would have seen them, you know, in Ingram's. I would have, you know, but I wouldn't have got an opportunity to work with them and interact with them and so forth. So to me, I see that as a barrier, but you know, that's the fun part of being a nonprofit executive, as far as I'm concerned. So.
I was a few years ago, we were doing a research piece on interviewing hospital CEOs, asking them what they'd like to see us do to strengthen our curriculum at the school. And basically they answered the same thing Matt just said. Because we get great technical skills, teach these people skills, teach them how to get along. There was I'm so we can get the words exactly right. The key to this is a fellow, a very bright young Wonderkind, who was on this trip to Africa with him, and he said he and his father's in his 40-year Peace Corps, built education systems all over Africa, amazing human being. And then we were talking one night about the keys to success. How can you really be successful in your career and your life? And Tom Wilson Tilson is his father, and he summarized it brilliantly. He said, smile, be nice, and work hard. And what was stunning about that is, as we were going across Kenya and Zanzibar and Tanzania, and most of these folks spoke Swahili, they were just absolutely wonderful people. These are folks living in remote villages, and that's really what it was all about. It was, and it wasn't phony bone. It was this genuine people-to-people, you know, interactions with it, and that's this emotional intelligence. You know, you can be as smart as you can be, but if you can't smile, be nice, and work hard, you're no damn fun to work with, right?
Again, words to walk away with, smile.
Yeah, especially in Kansas City, smile, be nice, and work hard, right? Kansas City, right?
Other questions? Christine.
My name is Christine Knutter, and I work for People's People International in the Youth Department. I have a question for Matt. You had mentioned that you do have more women as ED directors, but you said coming from the for-profit sector. That's a little bit concerning because that's not the path that we're taking. However, we hope that we'll be viewed as competent ED possibilities in the future.
That's a recent phenomenon in the Red Cross, because we had not seen it before. Most people came up through the organization or from another nonprofit organization. I mean, not just Red Cross, but it's only been recently we've seen that. And that's a little bit of a concern, because for those of us working in this Star Trek program I was talking about earlier, where we're trying to develop within the Red Cross young professionals to be managers of our largest, it's actually, that program is designed for the largest 150 Red Cross units, but again, that in turn would hopefully translate to people moving from top 150 to top 50. And 50 is based on population served and budget and that kind of thing. And I don't know why that is. There isn't a good answer to that. It becomes a little bit demoralizing to the people who are in our training program to see these jobs being filled from outside the organization. I think one of the things that we've seen is when they have been hired from outside the organization, it is because they have broad local community knowledge. In other words, they weren't hired, the CEO in New York, for example, a wonderful lady, hospital administrator, historically now working as the CEO of American Red Cross, outstanding professionally. She came from outside the Red Cross, but what she had was local knowledge. She was from New York. She wasn't from Chicago or Los Angeles. So she was well connected in New York. The same thing is true of our manager recently hired in Chicago and recently in Minneapolis, St. Paul. All three of them came from outside the organization, but they all had local knowledge. Not one of them came from somewhere else in the country. So that local knowledge, that contact piece, that is what really. Now, most of them, actually all three of them, had a lot of nonprofit experience in their background, having served on a lot of boards and for many different kinds of organizations. And so they brought that knowledge of nonprofit and working with boards. So none of them had to learn how to work with a board. So, again, that is a little bit disconcerting. We're trying to figure out why that is, and can we not, provide, or we're not providing good candidates from within the organization to fill those jobs. That we're forcing people to go outside the organization. But that local knowledge piece is becoming a big issue too. I don't know. You don't train to that. That's just something that occurs, and because we're always working so hard on the fundraising side, that's a pretty critical piece. Is that excellent?
Other questions? Comments?
Kind of as a follow-up to that, Michelle, you said you worked in the for-profit sector for 3 years, and do you feel that someone working in the nonprofit sector their whole lives are going to have are going to be competent leaders in the nonprofit?
Yeah, I definitely, excuse me, I definitely think so. One of the things I think that you see, and I've seen this probably since, for me, in my experience, around the year 2000, is that right? Yeah. 2002 maybe, when I was the National Director of Training for the National Kidney Foundation, we spent a year kicking off a program really focusing on the fact that nonprofit is just a name. If you don't make margin, then you have to start cutting back on mission. And so to be called a nonprofit, I mean, you're not for profit, you're tax exempt, but your only difference is you're not giving the money back to shareholders. So you still have to be very profit focused, you have to be very business focused. One of the things Matt said earlier is the focus on, you need to be up to date on HR, you need to know finance and audit. And so I think that I think boards are beginning to be more savvy about saying, yeah, we are a business, and we have to operate like a business, and the people running this organization need to have business skills. So, in my opinion, maybe sometimes when they're seeing these people from the outside, from for-profit, beginning to work in nonprofit, it's those boards saying, we need more of those business skills. So the way I think you can combat that is by making sure that you develop those business skills, that you understand and you can budget, that you have good finance and audit background, that you understand tax laws, that you understand HR. And if that's the way you go to professional associations and get that additional professional development in those topic areas, then I think you can go head to head against people that are in the for-profit sector, but you have to be mindful of the fact that it's not just all about volunteer management and fundraising. You've got to have these other core business skills to bring to the table.
There's a for-profit chauvinism that we see, and I'd have to actually go back and calculate it, but I get asked a lot to meet with folks that are bored or frustrated or lost their job or don't want to work anymore as a lawyer or whatever, and want to come in or because they see it as a lot easier. They see their skills as more transferable. When we actually study the success, most of them got their ass kicked. It's a much more complex business than they realize. And when they go back a year or two later, or they come back a year or two later, or run into them a year or two later, and they've been working in the field, they say, I had no idea how complicated this was. I had no idea how hard it was to run a business when you can't price a product at cost. I had no idea how politically complicated the world was with 27 different funders. I had no idea what it was like to be in a perpetual spin and shoot journey for fundraising and donors and boards and blah, 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 blah. So your advantage is you've been trained or you've been exposed and you've developed a tolerance and a skill set at dealing with ambiguity and complexity, right? You got your knees bent. You're good at that stuff. If you've worked in the field for any period of time, or if you've been trained at Rockhurst or Jewel or Midwest Center or UKC or any of the other places that are serious about it. Angela just finished a class, and Jeff just finished a class, several of you on innovations. What we were talking about the intervening complexity of all of these issues and how do you learn to use them to your advantage, right? My bet is a year or two or three from now, she'll be amazed at how much better and how much more skilled she is at dealing with that stuff than you went through those classes too. So the point is your advantage is you're better at the complexity and you like it, right? You can tolerate that kind of stuff. That's the fun part of the gig, right? It is not boring working in the nonprofit sector. It really isn't.
As we ask more questions, I would also suggest that those of you in the audience that have been in the sector a little longer, we want to hear your voices too and your questions. We really want to make this an intergenerational dialogue. So I'm going to start pushing you a little bit. We love hearing from the young folks. We want to hear from those that have been in the sector a little longer too. Any other questions, comments?
You guys can't leave 20 minutes early.
No,
Never
I'm not going to let you. Swin?
I would just...
Name and organization first.
Sorry, thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Sue Amstrom, and I'm with American Humanics. I have the great joy of being able to work with Steve and Patrick both. Maybe the YNPN would reach out to some of us in that older generation, and maybe what we could do is even provide a formal mentoring program here in Kansas City. City. I'm not going to speak for my colleagues, but maybe that's something that we can assist with. If not formal, informal. You right now have socials, and I remember when I first joined American Humanics, I asked either one of you, I don't remember which one, can I go to? And you were very polite and said that most people would probably be significantly younger than me, so I got the, got the point. Didn't go. But maybe there's an opportunity for us to come together in another way, whether it's social or formal educational, whatever. But we've got some really great things going for us in Kansas City, as the data showed. Again, it was a small sample, 22 respondents, but we do have a well-educated young nonprofit community here in Kansas City from a classical sense, okay? And I have a doctorate, so I'm all about education, folks. But I'm saying that maybe the experience that some of us that have gained in the field over these years could be shared in some way. So I know I would be willing to do that.
I want to pick on this bright man sitting next to me. He exhibits a behavior that puts a twist on this mentoring issue. There was a very wise man that I learned to listen to named Mickey Slaughter that was here at this foundation. Started the entrepreneurial side of it. And he coined the phrase, the first time I ever heard it, he was 25 or 30 years ago. He said, you need to learn to seek, he called it Dutch uncle or Dutch aunt.
Yes.
And it's a perpetual journey of mentoring. It isn't just you and I being a mentor. It's understanding that you almost have a Easter egg hunt forever around this issue. But the key to Dutch uncle and Dutch aunt is that it can't be offered, it has to be asked. In other words, I can't say to Patrick, you need to do, because then I step into the parenting role or the preaching role or the whatever role, right? But he's really good at saying, Gary, got any ideas on this, that, or the other, right? And in this town especially, I learned that a long time ago with key funders, that if you will go to them, not manipulative, not Machiavellian, not phony, they know lots of stuff, right? They've seen it from almost every possible angle. And if you're genuine about asking for their help in problem solving or thinking through an issue or helping you deal with complexity, they are amazingly good at helping you do that. And it does form a bonded, long-lasting relationship that sooner or later maybe also helps you with the money. But mostly it helps you with the ideas, not a problem. So Chuck Curran, I was lucky way back when early in my career following Chuck Curran. For whatever reason, we developed that. I could call him. It didn't have to be a 12-hour meeting. It was a phone call saying, I have no idea. Got any suggestions? And that was really key to my early career, at least.
I think you made a great point about mentoring and at least in a professional setting, and that it can't be forced, and that saying, well, this person matches with this person's career, let's put them together and let them exchange emails and then build this great relationship. That doesn't work. And I think UMKC, correct me if I'm wrong, has tried something with their graduate program to get their MPA students in a mentoring role, and it just really hasn't taken off. But it's one of those, you get pizza and you invite a bunch of people, that doesn't create a mentoring relationship. It's one of those that has to be on an individual basis. And I think the idea of trying to connect it is great. How to is still the question out there. But I think it's on an individual basis, and it's me different than Steve, different than anybody else.
Let me pose this question out there. We've got, as we wrap up in the next 5 or 10 minutes, what are some examples that you've seen sort of the leadership transitions in your organizations? What are some of the problems that you've seen in your organization? What are some of the solutions that you're trying to work with? Are there any programs you've put together or ways that you're addressing any of these issues? I'd love to hear more from the audience about some of your experiences. Crickets, huh?
Stephen was looking for a response from me, but I'll give one. I would say look for organizations that have a track record of turning out young professionals who move on to jobs in other organizations in the roles of senior management and leadership, and we're not one of those right now. As I said, our leadership team currently is mostly 50-something, and yet I came up in an organization. I worked for a manager in Red Cross in Dallas many years ago, and our life expectancy as a chief operating officer, associate executive director, was like 5 years, and then he kicked us out. I remember one day he invited me into his office and said, well, time for you to leave, which is not something most of us want to hear, but the track record was that my 3 predecessors had all gone on to manage other Red Cross chapters, and it was Mike's, he enjoyed that role. He liked having that job, that number 2 position, occupied by someone who he could work with for 4 or 5 years and then send packing. And I'm not sure he would have given any one of us that opportunity had he thought we were going to land there and never move on. So he knew that we had to be mobile and we had to be willing to make that change. And I do think there are organizations that have that reputation. The YMCA has done that here. They've done a good job of developing senior managers, and they've moved on to other organizations. And there are other organizations that have done that. We're not one of those right now, and I'm disappointed by that because we have a lot of incumbents in jobs, but maybe that'll change over time. But I do think looking for an organization where you get that opportunity is important thing.
Emulate Ewing Company. He was brilliant. He was the most brilliant leader I've ever seen in all of my career, showing genuine appreciation for what you did for your organization, or what you are, who you are as a human being. He was brilliant at this. I mean, the stories in this place are legend. But my favorite is that if you had done something really terrific to help grow the organization, you take the time to write your parents and tell them what a great kid they raised, because, right? You go into people's offices or homes and these letters are mounted and framed in 3 pieces of protective glass. You with me? Yeah. So I mean, that genuine appreciation for this concept of associate or colleague, this smile, be nice, and work hard. It's amazing, guys. What goes around comes around. Yeah. You don't believe that? Ask Tom DeLay.
I'll embarrass Patrick, but I told his mother how terrific he was yesterday morning.
And she loves you for it.
I told his dad that a month ago at a lunch. You can't even go home, can you, without getting red?
Because we just need to put it in writing.
Yeah, we did put it in
writing. Another thought I had was that I think you need to make it known that you've got, set those career goals, and I know you hear that over and over and over again. There's a young lady in the Red Cross who's coming out of our current Star Trek program, and she wants my job. And she told me that when we first started the program about 2 years ago. And I see her about every 3 or 4 months at a meeting, and she asks me things like, how are you feeling? Do you have any health problems? Yeah, she does this on a regular basis, so I'm going to see her in about 2 weeks.
Did you forget to go on your walk this morning?
I'm going to see her in about 2 weeks, and so I'm going to tell her that I've arranged for her to receive my copies of my physical the next time I come. But she's made it. I think she would like to come. She's set some career goals, and I think that's terrific. So.
Any other final comments or questions for the panelists? Name and organization.
I'm Mike Terry with the American Red Cross, and when I frequently tell people that when I first started in the nonprofit sector, longer than I care to admit, I felt like I pretty much had all the answers. I'd gone to all the training and all the seminars, but more recently, the older I get, the more confused I am. And I say that because I think and we haven't really said this, but I think in a lot of ways this is a two-way street. We can learn a lot from what you all are bringing to the table now. Courtney is new with our organization, and hardly a day goes by that I don't say, well, now, how did you make your computer do this? Because I don't understand it. But in many ways, we have a lot to learn from you all because of just some of the new innovative and new ideas that you're bringing into the organization. So don't be afraid to bring forth those ideas and notions and opinions, because you all have a lot to we can learn from you too. And,
The truth is, you're scared of the hell out of us, right? You guys can do a whole bunch of stuff that I can't do, right? So that's the opportunity for working together. That's the intergenerational X, Y, civic, boomer stuff that'll be fun to see if we can figure out as a society. You're going to have a lot of folks like me that do take early retirement and still have another 20 or 30 years of stuff we're going to do. We're not going to eat bog melons. We're going to do something. You with me? I may not be in the catbird seat of running an agency anymore, but there's maybe mission trips to Africa, maybe we'll work on malaria projects together. I mean, who knows, right? Where this journey goes, but it's going to be fun.
He's telling me to say my name in my organization.
Yes.
Hillary Bushel, I'm with the Community Foundation. And my question is, how do you create that kind of leadership that promotes exactly what you were talking about? A lot of younger generations, I had my boss ask me at one point, did you plan on staying here long term? And I thought, that's a crazy question. Like, to me, at the time I was 24, and I said, I can't imagine staying anywhere for the rest of my career. You know, and so how do you create that leadership piece where your leadership understands that to cultivate you and help you in your professional development, but they don't feel like you're just leaving, so they don't want to invest the time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's a tough issue because
that's
you
the
guys
big
are like a
question.
room full of hummingbirds for me. I'm serious.
Yeah.
It feels like I've walked into a room full of hummingbirds. Have you ever been in a room full of hummingbirds? Or have you ever been any place where there's a bunch of hummingbirds spinning around you? They're scary, right? They got little sharp things on them. They go really fast. And we were doing a planning session with an organization in Washington, and it was all, they happened to be all women, and they all had laptops. And I asked them to do a brainstorming session and take out a piece of paper, and they revolted. They wouldn't write it down on a piece of paper. Only if you let us put it on a computer when we do your exercise. So we have to learn how to adjust to each other's style, right? We're learning to adjust to your hummingbird text messaging, chainsaw on your hip world, right?
But I don't think you should be afraid to ask for that. I mean, you can, you know, if there's enough of you making those statements, you can help change the culture of your organizations. And so I think it's important that if you're seeking that out, that you continue to ask, you know. I think the thing Patrick said, you know, ask to work on a project that's outside of your scope, so you can develop that. You know, ask for, and if you don't normally go to board meetings, ask for the opportunity just to go and see what it's like. I mean, those kinds of things, so you can really show the initiative and drive. And I would echo what Patrick says. You know, I get a lot of the calls too where people want to go and have coffee or go to lunch or just come to our office and talk about what it is they're doing. And to me, that speaks volumes. And when I do get the call later on, you know, do you know somebody who is interested in, you know, I need to hire, you know, someone for this. Those are the people that come to my mind, top of mind. So I think it is truly about your initiative. You've got to step out, whether it's on, you know, leadership development, whether it's on mentoring. You've got, that's the big thing now. It's really who shows the most initiative. Lots of skills can be learned.
I would really be concerned about working for an organization where the executive director didn't want to give you opportunities. And I've seen that, you know, where the executive director didn't want to lose someone and wanted them to be there for 30 years. And as a result of that, they never gave them the opportunity to, you know, work on projects. As Michelle mentioned, they didn't get to experience being parts of, you know, nonprofit professionals, though they were discouraged from doing those kind of things, as if all the knowledge was held by that individual. And in one case, and in the other case, they simply just didn't want them to leave. They knew that every time that happened, they had to, you know, go to work again, had to hire someone to, you know, to fill that position, and on and on and on. And I would really be concerned. I was in an organization where I saw that kind of behavior, and would really, again, back to my point, look for organizations where that's not the case, where the executive director congratulates you on accomplishments, as mentioned by Gary, and tells you that, hey, it's great that you've become a part of Young Nonprofit Professionals, and makes it known that they don't expect everyone to stay in that organization. They would like them to, but they don't expect them to, and when they move on to other organizations, they're congratulated for that, for their achievement, because they found a better opportunity either financially or from a professional standpoint or whatever. And that's the atmosphere, that's the right atmosphere.
I'd rather see you becoming what they call an entrepreneur. Leaving an organization is a lose-lose to some degree, right? Because you have to start over with some sort of pattern, and the organization has to start over with some sort of pattern, whether it's the rehire or whatever. But the opportunity to innovate or become take a new idea and advance it for that organization, that's fun, right? And everybody can play that game. Some of the very best ideas that we've ever worked on, most of the very best ideas that we've ever worked on, were ideas that came from one of us, Venture Woods, the thing that Kevin worked on in the printing days, use that as a case in point. That wasn't my idea, certainly. It was ideas that some folks said, I think this is an opportunity for us, and here's how we can go about doing it. And that's fun, to be able to work in that kind of environment. Leaving, well, you guys are going to have more opportunity to leave because you aren't going to be as fixed by pensions and health insurance, right? You'll be able to have mobile pensions and health insurance. And so we pretty much stay with our work because we have fixed pensions and health insurances. We didn't have the options. Salary wasn't the problem. Still isn't the problem. Yes? Yes, ma'am.
Kimberly Reed, and I'm with the National Archives. I have a question for the panel. What coping strategies would you recommend when you're dealing with leadership that's entrenched or already retired mentally, but they physically haven't left the building yet?
I want to make this the last question as we wrap up the session.
Okay, get out of Dodge. There are some times where you have guarded prognosis. And there's where I go back to the lady's comment about leaving.
I mean, if you feel that it's changing your career and impacting your career, that has to be your priority versus trying to make a difference in that organization. So you've got to protect yourself.
Task forces and teams of innovation, even retired in place, don't want to do it anymore. People will respond to an energy group that wants to try an idea. Sometimes. You with me? So creating a group of folks, a group of cohorts or an idea yourself, taking a concept document or a one-page summary or a small business plan to that person, those would be things I would be trying to understand what turns that person on, motivates them to do good work, and how does that fit, if at all, with my interest. And if there is no fit, you're just going to be as frustrated as they are.
One of the things I would add is that one of the positions I held, in any position I've ever been in, I've done a lot of work. I spent a lot of long hours doing a lot of work. But when I got to the place where I was saying work does not have to be this hard, that's when I knew that it was time for me to move on.
I'd like to thank all of you and thank the panelists, especially for coming out and being a part of us this morning. If we give them a round of applause. At this point, I'd like to turn it back over to Courtney to wrap up. And please, we've got the room for a little bit, so afterwards, stick around. And thank you.
I'd also like to thank the panelists too, Matt, Michelle, Gary, and Patrick for their participation today. We'd also like to thank the Kauffman Foundation again for hosting us, and Entire Computer Solutions for sponsoring us today, and also the Council on Philanthropy for all of their support and guidance. We hope that you've enjoyed your time today, and please be sure to fill out the evaluation card on your table. It looks like this. And there's more information on YNPN and our happy hour that's coming up on May 8th, so we'd love to have you all come. And, if there's any interest in YNPN, please come and talk to any of us. And please do take this information, these conversations here today, back to your offices to spark more interest. I think there's a lot more conversation that's going to come out of this. And again, if there's any questions or comments, feel free to ask any of us after the presentation. We hope you enjoyed yourselves. Thanks.